We have a major update in the case of the father charged in the shooting death of his son's girlfriend. We have the wrongful death lawsuit just filed by Whitney Robeson's family that is shedding light on what allegedly happened the night she died, and the family is making some shocking allegations. What type of experience did he have with firearms? We also just spoke with Jeffrey Towers' attorney. He is the man facing charges in this case. Initially, Whitney's death was considered an accident. What Towers' attorney said after we asked him about what changed. We're on The Case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey guys, thanks so much for following this case with us. Before we begin, I have to thank our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. There's a reason why On The Case is one of the most watched true crime shows on YouTube, and there's a reason why Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. For over 35 years, they've been fighting for the people, and they've recovered more than $30 billion for their clients. And the proof, it's in their track record. With more than 1,000 lawyers across 100 offices nationwide, hiring Morgan & Morgan is like hiring an army to go into battle for you, a team that will fight hard to get their clients the compensation they deserve. Not all law firms are the same. You hire the wrong one and you may be beat before you even start. So if you are ever injured, here's what you do. You can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless you win. For more information, you can go to forthepeople.com/OTC. You can click the link in the description below or scan this QR code on your screen. All right, we're going to get to our interview with Jeffrey Towers' attorney here in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to break down the details in this new wrongful death lawsuit that was filed by the family of the victim in this case. The family of Whitney Robeson just filed this lawsuit in Jefferson County, Alabama Civil Court. That is the county where she lost her life back in March. Now, to this point, we knew on March 7th, police were called to a home in Trussville, Alabama, just about a half hour northeast of Birmingham. It was a Saturday night around 9:20 in the evening when a gunshot was fired, according to police. Now, Whitney was shot and she was taken to a hospital in Birmingham where she was pronounced dead a little more than an hour later. Whitney had just graduated from Auburn University a year prior. And here are some of the pictures from her interior design page. She had just started working in the design space at the time of her death. She was originally from Virginia. Her family says from the very beginning, that is what she wanted to do with her life. In fact, she went to Auburn. That's what brought her to the state of Alabama because of the school's very strong interior design program. Whitney's obituary reads, though we never could have begun to imagine it, the final chapter of Whitney's life took place in Birmingham, Alabama, mere weeks before her tragic and unexpected passing. Whitney was hitting her stride exactly the way we always knew she would, in her new role as a trade consultant at Restoration Hardware. This marvelous independent woman was on the cusp of her successful career in interior design, the job she had always wanted since she was a little girl watching HGTV. In the precious little time she had been in that role, Whitney's new colleagues and supervisor were instantly taken by her kindness, talent, attentiveness, and integrity. To have known Whitney, no matter where, how, why, or for how long, is to have been touched and transformed by her radiant soul. Now, Whitney was dating the son of the man who is now facing a manslaughter charge in connection to her death, 54-year-old Jeffrey Scott Towers. Now, we'll get to what his attorney is telling us here in just a moment, but this is a picture of Jeffrey that his legal team provided us. Now, the lawsuit that was filed by Whitney's family alleges that she was at Towers' home with her boyfriend and his dad, Jeffrey Scott Towers. Now, Jeffrey Towers, according to this lawsuit, was allegedly showing Whitney and his son a collection of antique firearms in the house. Towers allegedly had a .22 caliber revolver in his hands. Quote, whether known or unknown to defendant Towers, the firearm being handled was loaded, and as he displayed the weapon to Whitney and his son, a single shot was inadvertently fired. Now, the suit claims that the bullet hit Whitney in the upper left side of her chest. Her cause of death was a gunshot wound to the chest. She was allegedly hit in the left lung, heart, and aorta, according to this lawsuit. The suit also says there were no drugs or alcohol in her system at the time of her death. The suit goes on to say that Towers owed a duty of care to Whitney Robeson to act reasonably and safely in the handling, operation, and control of a firearm, and the lawsuit says he allegedly didn't do that. The lawsuit also says that Towers had a duty to safely inspect and maintain any and all firearms on his property. The suit accused Towers of not inspecting the gun to make sure it wasn't loaded. Now, the suit accuses Towers of having a lack of knowledge of firearm safety, and it says he allegedly acted reckless. And because of that, Whitney Robeson was killed. Towers is also accused of negligence in this lawsuit for allegedly not doing the proper maintenance on the gun that went off. Again, we know it was, according to this lawsuit, a .22 caliber revolver, and it was an antique gun set. But as far as how old this gun was, the condition it was in, those details have yet to be allegedly released. And this lawsuit is now demanding an unspecified amount of damages. So let's talk about the criminal side here, because Towers is now charged with manslaughter, and something appears to have changed in this investigation to get to this point. Because you go back to March 7th, this terrible tragedy happens, and on that night, according to AL.com, the incident was considered isolated with no threat to the public. Police also said they had someone detained. Now, the coroner in Jefferson County, Alabama, ruled that Whitney's death was an accident. No charges were filed, and the story at that point in time appeared to be not a criminal case, but it was just a very tragic accident, a loss of life, the kind that no family or loved one could ever recover from. But then here we go, roughly 2 months later, after Whitney was shot and killed inside this home, the Trussville Police Department said, quote, following an extensive investigation conducted by the department's Criminal Investigations Division, detectives obtained an arrest warrant on May 11th, 2026, through the Jefferson County District Attorney's Office for Jeffrey Scott Towers of Trussville. Police have charged Jeffrey Scott Towers with manslaughter. Police say that Towers was taken into custody on May 11th without incident, and he was able to post a $30,000 bond. And right now, he is out as this case continues to work through the criminal justice system. His attorney did address some of the criticism of that bond, because a lot of people, and I've seen it in the comments section, people have pointed and said, for someone who is accused in the death of somebody else, even if it is manslaughter, that there are questions as to why the bond wasn't more and why he's able to be released. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. I do want to show you the statement that initially Jeffrey Scott Towers' attorneys put out. It reads, quote, what happened to Miss Robeson was a tragic event. While we understand that the justice system must play out, we know that the facts will show that Mr. Towers has no criminal history, has been a productive and upstanding citizen for his entire life, and is not guilty of these charges. I want to be clear before we get to the interview with Towers' attorney, Johnny Amari, who tells us that Towers is next expected to be in court in July, that this narrative that is being put out of what allegedly happened at his house on that night in March, it is from a civil lawsuit being brought by the victim in this story. We have yet to hear the narrative being put forward by prosecutors who are working the criminal case. Joining us now to talk a little bit more about this case is Jeffrey Towers' attorney, Johnny Amari. Thank you, sir, for taking the time to be with us. This wrongful death lawsuit that's been filed by the family of Whitney Robeson, what's your reaction to what that alleges against your client?
Well, let me say, we expected this. I mean, this is obviously such a tragic incident. And whenever there's a loss of life, there's going to be an evaluation as to, what caused it, obviously, and different facts are going to come out. But you would fully expect a civil lawsuit or a wrongful death suit in a situation like this. So, we were expecting it. I just saw it over the weekend. I haven't had an opportunity to speak to the plaintiff's lawyer, and I'm not at this time, retained as a civil attorney. So, but my understanding of a situation like this, more than likely that civil case will be stayed while the criminal case runs its course.
And on the criminal side, I mean, you do have in this civil lawsuit, it lays out a narrative for the first time about what from their perspective, allegedly happened inside the home. They say that your client was showing off an antique firearm, a .22 revolver, and it somehow goes off, and that bullet took Whitney's life. What has your client told you from his perspective of what happened that night?
Well, I'm going to stay away from anything my client and I have talked about right now. one thing I'll tell you is whenever you're this early in a criminal case like we are, I think he was just charged last week, we're still receiving information just like everybody else, including discovery. We just filed our motion for discovery last week. It was granted, and we have just started to receive some discovery now, but we haven't had an opportunity to fully review and see what's missing, what may still be coming. But that is all part of this criminal process. That's just going to really take a little time to run its course.
No, and I totally get that, totally respect, that as we're still waiting for information to be released from prosecutors in this case about what allegedly happened. What can you tell us about your client's, what type of experience did he have with firearms?
That probably, I didn't know my client personally before this, so it's probably something I'm going to evaluate with him. One thing I will tell you about my client, he really did care for Miss Robeson, and this family cared about her. They're devastated. I mean, my client is completely devastated about this. One thing I will tell you about my client, he doesn't have a criminal history. He doesn't abuse drugs or alcohol. In fact, we're pretty confident that a toxicology report will be made available at some point, which will show that there was no drugs or alcohol in his blood at the time. So this really was just a tragic, tragic event.
You go back and just from the narrative that's been laid out to this point, it was ruled an accidental shooting, or reportedly was ruled by the coroner, and now he's facing a manslaughter charge. What changed over the roughly 2 months between when it was put out there that this was an accident to now your client being charged with manslaughter?
That is a fair question. That was the first question that I was asked by my client. And one thing that's where the discovery process will be helpful in answering that question. Until we see what the state saw different 2 months later, and I probably want to know the answer to that question as much as anyone else, because when that event took place and he was released without being charged, we were hopeful that that would be the end of any criminal case. We fully expected a wrongful death action, but on the civil side, but we thought that would be the end of a criminal case because we've always believed in our client. We've always believed that he did not do anything reckless or intentional. So what changed in the last 2 months? I think that question will be answered as we get more and more information from the police and from the district attorney's office.
I know it was reported the night that she passed away that someone was detained from the home. It was considered an isolated incident. What interactions did your client have with law enforcement from that night moving forward?
My client did not have any interactions with law enforcement after that night. So that would have been his first contact with law enforcement. After that, there's been no communication between him, really no contact between him and law enforcement.
And I know you said you weren't expecting the criminal side of it with this manslaughter charge. I mean, what type of, I guess, communication? There was no communication from that night moving forward about whether or not any sort of investigation was still ongoing?
The Trustful Police Department and the district attorney's office were pretty tight-lipped over the last couple of months. So, and I don't want to say we didn't expect it. We were hopeful that no criminal case would come out of it.
What was your client's reaction when he found out that he was being charged with manslaughter?
I think he was upset, but and there's no way for me to really fully express this, and I wish I could. This man is more upset about what happened to Whitney than anything else that involves him. He is devastated. He's gutted about her loss of life. So anything that I've dealt with him, it's never been about me. It's been more about why. Why did this have to happen to her? And so I don't know how to really get that across, but that was one of the reasons I'm doing, talking to you is I'm trying to get the message across that this really was a good man, or is a good man. He loved his family and he cared for Whitney, and this no one could have ever seen this coming. This is just a horrible, horrible event that took place.
What was his relationship like previously with her family?
I don't know. I think they had had some time to spend with her. My client and his wife they were very fond of her, and so I think that was a something they were happy about, that their son had found somebody that they were you know thought was nice, and proud that he was with somebody.
And I know that there's only so much you can say, and you're still kind of figuring things out yourself. But like, what was she doing over at the house on that evening on the night of the 7th in March?
I'd have to speculate. I don't really know. I imagine it was just like any other event when you have a outing with friends and family. I'd have to speculate, so I don't want to.
Uh, when's your client? I know that he was able to post that $30,000 bond. What are you anticipating happens next in this case?
Yeah, and one thing I did want to talk to you about the bond. I've noticed a lot of chatter about the bond. Alabama has kind of a schedule where it lays out what the recommended bonds would be um, for certain types of crimes. This particular Class B felony, the recommended bond schedule is $5,000 to $30,000. So his bond was actually the highest on the bond schedule. Um, as far as the next steps of this case, there's kind of a preliminary type hearing that'll be coming up in a couple of months. We'll continue to try to get any discovery that may still be out there. And that's an opportunity where us in the district attorney's office will talk about, where we are with the case. And then from there, decisions will be made about whether to have preliminary hearing, whether the case is waived to the grand jury. Pretty much the same process of any defendant. It's really not much different for Mr. Towers.
In a case like this, I mean, what type of discovery are you looking for to help build your case to prove that your client's innocent?
Well, don't forget that we're going to hold the state to their burden to prove him guilty. So evidence that
For
we're
sure.
going to for are going to be things that will show that there's reasonable doubt that he committed a crime. And, obviously things like toxicology reports, I think, would be important. We'll receive some other reports from the police about statements that may or may not have been made the night of, things like that.
And when you look at and again, I recognize that there's only so much you can say, but based off the civil lawsuit that he was allegedly showing off this antique gun collection that he had, is he someone who I know you haven't been able to speak about his experience with guns, but is it something that he likes showing off antique guns? That this is something that he would regularly do when people would come over to his house?
Yeah, that's one of those things. I didn't really know him personally before this, so I wouldn't know how to answer that question for sure.
How often are you communicating with your client? I mean, as you go through kind of this process now, certainly there's a lot of attention on this story. People are starting to learn about what allegedly happened and the allegations that he's facing. Like, what are you telling him on a day-to-day basis as this is going forward?
So, I'm kind of one of those lawyers. I adjust to my clients. I have some clients that want to talk to me every day. I have some clients that just tell me where to sign, and everything in between. I make myself available, especially with a case like this, with this much attention that it's receiving. I make myself available to my clients pretty much 24 hours a day. So, it's up to him if he feels like he needs to talk to me or not.
I know you said he's devastated, but I mean, how would you characterize, just kind of how he is going? Certainly he's dealing with the shock of this, maybe the surprise that he's facing this manslaughter charge. I mean, how is he dealing with all the attention that's come with this case?
He's kind of cut from that old school cloth that just kind of put your nose to the grindstone. I think he was a hard worker before all this. I think he's probably just jumped in even deeper into his work to try to, maybe find some normalcy and keep some things off of his mind. But I can't imagine too much time goes by without him thinking about this on a daily basis.
All right, Johnny Amari, attorney for Jeffrey Towers, just an incredibly sad case out of Alabama. Thank you, sir, for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate it.
Hey, I really appreciate it, and we can catch up later as we get more information. But thank you for this opportunity to speak.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.